Always a topic on the Republican debate stage. Who best emulates the ideals of President Ronald Reagan? Now, the candidates will often talk about the lessons of history and how Reagan would address a problem today. Our next guest on the Hardline has spent his life studying presidents and in particular Ronald Reagan. He is a presidential historian and author of Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Let's welcome in author Craig Shirley. Hi, Craig. How are you doing today?
Rick, how are you? Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, sir. You know, there actually are T-shirts out there for just $21.97. You can get a picture of the 40th president over the words WWRD. So, is there a candidate out there running for president who you believe maybe has some of that Reagan charisma, some of that Reagan magic to lead our nation?
Rick, the answer is I don't know. I mean, I think our country certainly needs another Ronald Reagan. That's for certain. But you know, at this point in the 1980 campaign, 1979, is that Reagan wasn't even the front runner for the nomination. It was George H.W. Bush by this point. Reagan had fallen by the wayside to a great degree. And few thought he was going to be the nominee or the next president, or that he would, if he even was president, that he would be a great president. So it's hard to project into the future and say one of these candidates. I see and hear faint echoes of Reagan in most of them, in Trump and the anti-establishment, and talking about the future and talking about making America great again. In Chris Christie to some degree, and Rand Paul to some degree, and certainly in Ted Cruz. In his feistiness and his ideological principles. So I hear faint echoes of Reagan in almost all the 2016 aspirants.
Well, Craig, I wanted to get into also, beyond the charisma, the policy aspect, because many in the Republican Party have compared our current fight with ISIS to the challenge President Reagan faced with the Soviet Union. What lessons can be drawn from what President Reagan did as we take on the terrorists in 2015?
Well, you know, that's interesting because, you know, Reagan, and he said so in his diary and later in his autobiography, is that a president can do little without the support of the American people. So Reagan often went on national television and talked to the American people why we're engaged, either in aid to the Contras or some other foreign policy crisis, or aid to the Afghanistan Mujahideen fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan. What was at stake, why he needed the support of the American people, and what the eventual outcome he hoped to achieve. He always laid out what he wanted to do to the American people to rally them to his side. Barack Obama hasn't done so, so everybody's confused over, you know, Russian shoot down of a plane in Turkey. Does it help us? Does it hurt us? Is Assad staying in power help us or hurt us? Everybody's, quite frankly, confused because Barack Obama has never explained to the American people why he thinks that we ought to have a presence in the Middle East.
So much of it is being that great communicator in chief, then.
Precisely, exactly.
Yeah. All right, I want to talk about the whole Syrian refugee issue, because Ronald Reagan was dealing with refugees, dealing with immigration. Reason magazine actually took a look at his record just 6 months into his presidency. He said, "We shall seek new ways to integrate refugees into our society without nurturing their dependence on welfare." At the time, the issue was welfare. Of course, now it is our national security. Where do you see Reagan right now when it comes to refugees, in particular what we're dealing with Syria?
You know, this is interesting. I think that the shining city on a hill, which he often referred to, has been misinterpreted. He talked about the shining city as if it was a beacon, not an open invitation for people to come here. Is that when he talked about a revolution without borders, it was to spread the ideas of democracy and free markets into other countries so they themselves could build themselves up as prosperous democracies without having to come to the United States. So I think that Reagan, you know, whether it was in Nicaragua or it was in El Salvador, whether it was in the Warsaw Pact countries or the Baltics, is that he wanted to topple the Soviet domination or occupation of them, but not to the Czech people needed to come to the United States because they could do for themselves right there in their own country, which is proven to be right.
Craig, I'm going to jump in real quick because that's all the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. We could go on for hours, right? Talking about Ronald Reagan as it affects today. The book again, Last Act, The Final Years of Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan. Hey, that's it for me on the Hardline. Stick around because after the break, host Ed Berliner has much more, including his Thanksgiving commentary.